The silence of space was deceptive, too peaceful, too still. Captain Sarah Voss watched the alien armada in the distance, her hands clenched around the armrests of her seat. Her breath was shallow, barely a whisper against the constant hum of the ship's systems. Outside the viewport, the black expanse of the void was broken only by the cold, glimmering shapes of the Drow fleet. Thousands of their ships hovered in formation, vast and menacing, a storm ready to descend on humanity's last defense. "We shouldn't be here," Lieutenant Mark Harlan muttered from the co-pilot's seat, his voice tense. His wide eyes betrayed the fear beneath his professional exterior. Voss didn't look away from the viewport. "We don't have a choice. We're the eyes for the fleet. Without us, they won't know what's coming." Harlan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his short, dark hair. "I've heard the stories, Captain. About what they do to captured ships. To their crews." "So have I," she replied calmly. "And that's why we're not getting caught." The alien ships loomed closer, their forms strange and unsettling. Unlike human vessels, the Drow fleet seemed alive, shimmering with an organic glow, their hulls pulsating as though they were breathing. Each ship was a grotesque blend of sleek technology and something far more sinister. Voss had seen them before, but the sight still sent a chill down her spine. "They think we're weak," she continued, eyes narrowing. "They think we're prey. That's their first mistake." Harlan swallowed, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the controls. "And their second? They underestimate us." There was a pause. The only sound was the soft beep of the navigation system as it tracked the alien fleet's movements. Then, suddenly, one of the Drow ships shifted, turning directly toward them. The proximity alarms blared to life, red lights flashing across the cockpit. "Damn it!" Harlan cursed, his voice rising in panic. "They've spotted us!" Voss was already moving. Her fingers danced over the controls, and the ship veered sharply to the right, engines flaring to full power. The sleek human scout ship darted through the asteroid field like a shadow, weaving between massive rocks and debris. Behind them, the Drow ship gave chase, its massive form gliding through space with terrifying speed. "They're faster than I thought," Harlan gasped, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. Voss gritted her teeth, eyes scanning the asteroid field for an opening. "They're fast, but they're not maneuverable in tight spaces. Stay with me." The scout ship dipped and rolled, narrowly avoiding a collision with a jagged asteroid. The Drow ship was larger, its movements slower as it tried to follow. Voss took advantage of the delay, steering the ship into a narrow crevice between two massive boulders. The Drow ship hesitated for a split second, just enough time. "Now!" Voss barked. With a flick of her wrist, the scout ship accelerated, slipping through the crevice just as the two asteroids collided behind them. The Drow ship smashed into the debris, its glowing hull cracking under the impact. In the cockpit, alarms wailed as the alien ship lost control, spiraling away from their trajectory. "Got them!" Harlan breathed in disbelief. "We actually lost them." Voss didn't respond immediately. She watched the alien ship drift into the void, the sense of victory tempered by the reality of their situation. This was just one scout ship in a fleet of thousands. It had been a small victory, but the real battle was still ahead. "We're not out of this yet," she said, her voice steady but grim. "Transmit the data back to command. They need to know what we're up against." Harlan nodded and quickly began inputting the coordinates for their return. The data they'd collected, information about the Drow fleet's size, their movement patterns, would be crucial for Earth's defenses. But as Voss stared at the looming mass of the Drow fleet in the distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still vastly outmatched. Her gaze hardened. "They think they're unbeatable," she murmured, more to herself than to Harlan. "We'll show them just how wrong they are." The scout ship turned, engines flaring as it sped toward the safety of Earth's fleet. Behind them, the Drow armada remained a dark, looming presence on the edge of human space, an unstoppable force preparing to crush humanity's last hope. But Sarah Voss wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The scout ship hurtled through space, its engines roaring as it carved a path back toward the fleet. Captain Sarah Voss glanced at the console, watching the data stream through, the Drow fleet's numbers, their formations, the terrible precision of their advance. It was all there, flashing in cold, impersonal code. She had seen enough. "How long until we're in communication range?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Lieutenant Harlan glanced at his readouts, his face pale but focused. 10 minutes at this speed. We'll make it. Voss nodded, though her stomach clenched with unease. If they don't catch us first. A tense silence fell between them, the hum of the ship the only sound in the cockpit. Outside, the stars blurred into streaks of light, and the vast blackness of space pressed in on them from all sides. The Drow were out there, waiting, hunting. They had tasted human defiance, and Voss knew they wouldn't let it go unanswered. "They're coming for us, aren't they?" Harlan's voice was barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the radar. "They will. But we'll be ready this time." Voss's voice was calm, though her mind raced with possibilities. She couldn't let fear paralyze them now. Not when everything hung on their survival. A sharp beep cut through the quiet. Harlan tensed, his fingers flying across the controls. "Incoming signal, Drow warships on an intercept course. 4 of them, closing fast." "How long?" 5 minutes. Voss's mind raced, weighing their options. 4 Drow ships were more than enough to overwhelm them. Their scout ship wasn't built for battle, and a direct confrontation would be suicide. But there was no time to outmaneuver them, not with the warships already honing in. "Divert power to the shields," Voss ordered, her eyes narrowing in thought. "If they want us, they'll have to fight for it." Harlan hesitated. "The engines." "Divert the power, Lieutenant." Voss's tone left no room for argument. "We need to hold out until we can transmit the data." Harlan nodded, swallowing his fear as he followed her command. The lights in the cockpit dimmed as the energy was rerouted, the ship's shields flickering to life in a soft, shimmering glow. Outside, the blackness of space seemed to deepen, the distant glow of the Drow fleet now visible on the horizon. "They're close," Harlan muttered, his voice strained. "Too close." "Stay focused," Voss said, her eyes never leaving the radar. "We just need to survive a little longer." A tremor ran through the ship as the first Drow warship closed in. The impact reverberated through the hull, rattling the cockpit as the shields absorbed the brunt of the attack. Voss gritted her teeth, steadying herself against the console. "They're not holding back," she muttered, her eyes flicking to Harlan. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Before he could respond, another volley of fire slammed into the ship, shaking it violently. The shields flared, struggling to hold, but Voss could feel the strain. They were being torn apart. "We can't take much more of this." Harlan's voice cracked with panic, his hands flying over the controls as he fought to keep them stable. "Shields are failing." "Push through it," Voss barked. "We're almost in range." The ship shuddered again, this time more violently, and alarms blared as one of the auxiliary power conduits overloaded. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered ominously. "Damage to the rear thrusters," Harlan reported, his voice thick with dread. "We're losing speed." Voss felt her heart lurch, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Focus on keeping us steady. We're not dead yet." Another barrage of fire rocked the ship, sending it spiraling momentarily off course. The Drow ships were relentless, their weapons pounding against the scouts' failing shields. But then, just as the hull groaned under the strain, a small light blinked on the console. "We're in range!" Harlan's voice was laced with desperate relief. "Transmitting data now." Voss allowed herself a moment to breathe, her gaze hardening as she watched the data stream out. "Good. Now let's get out of this in one piece." The ship jerked as another explosion rocked the stern, sending a cascade of sparks raining down around them. But the transmission was live. The fleet would know what was coming. "Captain, Harlan began, but his words were cut off as the ship shuddered violently. The Drow were closing in for the kill. Voss gripped the controls, her face set in grim determination. Brace yourself! The ship roared as it surged forward, a final, desperate maneuver. They were out of time. The scout ship drifted in the void, sparks flickering from damaged panels as it limped forward. Captain Voss inhaled deeply, her hands gripping the controls, steadying her trembling fingers. The transmission had been sent, but they weren't out of danger yet. Far from it. Damage report, Harlan, Voss commanded, her voice sharp though exhaustion tugged at the edges. Lieutenant Harlan worked swiftly at his console, his face etched with worry. Shields are down to 12%, thrusters at 30%. We've lost most external sensors. Hull integrity's compromised. Another hit and we're done for. Voss's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to push harder, to fight back against the tightening noose of the Drell. But she knew their limits. Pushing now could mean their death. Any sign of the Drell ships? She asked, her voice low but urgent. Harlan scanned the limited data, his brow furrowed. They've broken off. Looks like they're regrouping, probably to prepare for a final strike. Voss cursed under her breath. They had little time. How long until we can reach the fleet? At least 20 minutes at this speed, Harlan answered grimly. But we won't last another 5 if they catch us again. Voss glanced at the flickering console, her mind racing. They couldn't outrun the Drow, and they couldn't outgun them. Their only hope was to evade detection long enough for the fleet to come to their aid. She thought quickly, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the star map. There's an asteroid field 5 minutes from here, she muttered, tapping the coordinates onto the console. It's risky, but we can hide in there and buy ourselves some time. Harlan's eyes widened. The ship's barely holding together, Captain. If we hit one of those asteroids, we don't have a choice. Voss interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. If we stay out here, we're dead. The field's our only chance. Harlan hesitated but then nodded, understanding the weight of the decision. Adjusting course now. The ship groaned as it veered toward the distant asteroid field, its engines sputtering under the strain. Voss stared out into the darkness, her thoughts racing with the implications of their mission. The Drow were stronger than they'd anticipated, far stronger. If the fleet didn't act soon, humanity's survival would hang by a thread. As they approached the asteroid field, the ship's proximity alarms blared, warning of the looming rocks ahead. Massive chunks of jagged stone tumbled through space, twisting and turning in chaotic orbits. Navigating through them with a crippled ship would require precision and luck, both of which were running low. Take it slow, Voss instructed, her gaze fixed on the swirling debris. We can't afford any mistakes. Harlan's hands hovered over the controls, his movements deliberate and tense. The ship dipped and weaved between the asteroids, every tremor and creak from the hull sending a fresh wave of anxiety through the cockpit. Sweat beaded on Harlan's forehead as he adjusted their course, narrowly avoiding a large asteroid that loomed ahead. Voss's heart pounded in her chest, each second dragging as they inched deeper into the field. She scanned the radar, watching for any sign of the Drow warships. The seconds stretched into minutes, and for a moment she dared to hope that they might make it. Then the console flashed red. They're back! Harlan's voice cracked with panic. 3 Drow ships closing fast! Voss's breath caught in her throat. They had no time to maneuver, no shields left to absorb another hit. The Drow would tear them apart before they even reached the heart of the field. But then, an idea sparked in her mind, a desperate, reckless plan. Cut the engines, she ordered abruptly, her eyes gleaming with determination. Harlan stared at her, shocked. Captain! Do it! Voss snapped. We're too easy to track while we're moving. Cut the engines, now. With a hesitant nod, Harlan complied, and the ship lurched to a halt, drifting silently among the asteroids. The hum of the engines faded, leaving only the eerie silence of space. For a long moment, there was nothing but the stillness of the cockpit, the two of them holding their breath as the Drow ships approached. Voss's pulse thundered in her ears, every second stretching unbearably. They're slowing down, Harlan whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. I think we've lost them. Voss exhaled, relief flooding her senses as the Drow ships passed by, their searchlights sweeping through the asteroid field without finding their mark. For now they were safe. But she knew this reprieve wouldn't last long. And when the Drow returned, they would be more determined than ever. "We're not done yet," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the blackness beyond. "Not by a long shot." The silence within the cockpit felt suffocating. Captain Voss leaned forward, her eyes locked on the radar, scanning for any flicker of movement. They had evaded the Drow for now, but she knew their reprieve was temporary. Every second they spent drifting was a second closer to discovery. "We can't stay hidden forever," Harlan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands, still resting on the controls, trembled slightly. He glanced at Voss. "What's our next move, Captain?" Voss inhaled sharply, pulling her gaze away from the dark expanse of asteroids. The weight of command pressed heavy on her chest. She had led missions before, but nothing like this. Their situation was grim, their resources dwindling, and the enemy was relentless. But defeat wasn't an option, not when Earth's survival depended on their next move. "We can't outfight them, and we can't outrun them," Voss replied, her tone calm but resolute. "But we might still outsmart them." She turned to Harlan, her expression hardening. "There's an old mining colony not far from here, long abandoned. It's a long shot, but if we can make it there, we might be able to repair enough systems to get back into the fight." Harlan's brow furrowed in thought. "A mining colony? Won't the Drow pick up on our signature as soon as we power up anything?" Voss smirked slightly. "That's where you come in. We don't need to power up anything big, just enough to mask our heat signature and repair the hull. If we move fast and stay quiet, they might overlook us long enough to pull this off." A flash of uncertainty crossed Harlan's face, but he nodded. He trusted her judgment, and they didn't have many options. "Coordinates locked. We're ready to move." With the engines still offline, the ship drifted slowly, navigating the asteroid field with the same painstaking precision as before. Voss kept her eyes on the console, the tension in the air palpable. Every creak of the hull, every flicker of the lights felt like the precursor to disaster. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last, until finally, the jagged silhouette of the old mining colony appeared on the horizon, nestled deep within the field. The place looked abandoned, a relic of a forgotten era. Twisted metal towers loomed in the distance, casting long shadows across the asteroid's surface. "We're here," Harlan said, a note of relief in his voice. Voss's grip on the console relaxed slightly, but she wasn't ready to breathe easy just yet. "Land us behind that ridge. We'll use the colony structure to hide from any scanners." The ship descended cautiously, its damaged thrusters humming faintly as it maneuvered into the shadow of the ridge. Dust swirled around them as the ship touched down, settling against the asteroid's surface. Voss exhaled slowly, her heart still racing. "Let's move fast. We don't know how much time we have." Harlan powered down the remaining systems, leaving only essential life support online. As the hum of the ship faded, the eerie quiet of space settled over them once again. Voss rose from her seat and grabbed her toolkit, motioning for Harlan to follow. Outside the ship, the asteroid's surface was barren, the air thin and frigid. The mining colony loomed above them, its rusted structures creaking in the silence. Voss and Harlan moved quickly, weaving through the debris-strewn path toward the colony's core. "This place gives me the creeps," Harlan muttered, his eyes darting around the darkened structures. Voss remained focused. "Stay sharp. We're not here for a tour." As they reached the heart of the colony, Voss knelt beside an old power generator. It was ancient, but with some luck, it might still have enough juice to help mask their ship's presence. She pulled out her tools and got to work, her movements swift and precise. Harlan kept watch, his hand resting nervously on his sidearm. Every crack and creak seemed magnified in the stillness, each sound making them both more tense. Suddenly, a faint beep echoed from Harlan's wrist console. His eyes widened as he checked the screen. "Captain, we've got movement, Drow scouts. They're closing in." Voss's stomach lurched. They weren't ready, not yet. How far? Less than 2 minutes. Her mind raced, calculating their next move. They couldn't run, and they couldn't hide forever. If they were discovered now, it was over. We need more time, Voss muttered through clenched teeth. She worked faster, her hands a blur as she connected the final wires. Captain, we're out of time! Just as Harlan spoke, the generator hummed to life, a faint glow emanating from its rusted frame. Voss stood, her eyes blazing with determination. Get ready! They'll never see this coming.